Things going for Thank you, Erica. Um, so just as always, I like to start these meetings off with the intentional acknowledgement that vital communities service and office are located within the sovereign unceded homeland of the Abenaki Nation and people. And since ancient times, the Abenaki know that they have always been here, are still here, and will always be here. We pay our respects to them and to the wisdom of their elders and culture. And this is something that we're continuously working with, at least within our organization, to bring this from a statement that lives on our website and doesn't do much into actually being embedded with our work and actually intentionally incorporated and uplifting those voices past, present, and future. So thank you for always engaging with that with us at the beginning of these meetings. So today what we're looking to do, just real quick, is continue kind of doing some of our hub spotlights and learning about the work that's happening in the region, just so we get a better sense of mapping out kind of our internal network. We have an update about where the process for technical assistance allocation is, as we've been connecting with some folks and learning what some of the needs are and what systems might work best to proceed forward with that. And then also discussing about how we want to start understanding how the work of all of the projects within this network interact with similar work being done by groups that are not here, and how to best support that work or learn from that work, and eventually develop a stronger, more representative understanding of the entire region and what's happening, and how to develop more resilience. So, but before that, we just wanted to invite everyone to connect really kind of quickly with a quick touch point, which we came up with a question of what's your favorite summer sound? So I think Erica dropped names in the chat for order for that, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So Megan, you are up first.
Favorite summer sound? Probably, I'm a super early riser, like with the sun. So I'm gonna say probably the birds, because it's always nice when it's like dark at 3 a.m. and I'm awake, but then they start chittering. I'm like, I'm not by myself anymore. Light is coming. So
Nice.
Yesterday when we were out in the field, it was hot and muggy, and then you could hear the leaves on the trees, and you could see the wind started blowing, and then you could see the rain coming. And so just that, like seeing the rain coming across the woods and sort of, yeah, I kind of, especially when it's hot and muggy. And so we just sort of all went like, hooray, and we got drenched. But anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, those are both really nice. Took me a second to kind of think about mine, but I always like hearing the frogs at night. Actually a couple of weeks ago, my partner and I were driving on like this old back dirt road in Guilford, and came across like the loudest collection of spring peepers that I think we've ever heard. Like it was deafening. So that was really, really wild. And I don't like them usually that loud, but I do like hearing the frogs. So
hi. Well, I love everything that everyone's said so far. And I usually really love the sound of rain, although it's getting a little old, perhaps a little intense, maybe. But I live in a neighborhood now, and I enjoy the sound of, yeah, people just out on the streets. There's also like an old-fashioned ice cream truck that goes by and plays a little song, which sounds annoying, but it's actually really sweet and fun, and the kids run after it. So yeah.
I would say that my favorite sound is coyotes as they're making their way down the river. I live right on the river, so if I have my window open at night, I can often hear them.
Hi, everyone. My favorite sound lately has been running water in all of its forms, from the sky, all the creeks rising up, dripping off the roof, and just really embracing because it's here. Why not?
Hi, everyone. Just before I get to my sound to make a connection, I was in the garden this morning and I heard a frog in the garden. So I thought, it's not supposed to be a frog here, but there's enough water for the frogs to be here. Yeah, my favorite sound is when I read this prompt, the first thing that came to my mind is barred owls in the middle of the night. There's nothing else that's summer like barred owls in the middle of the night.
I like barred owls as well. Hi, everybody. It's Lionel, and I heard some wood frogs last week with that croaky sound, and it was really nice. It made me relaxed.
So mine is bird specific. We have red-winged blackbirds on our property, and they hang around on the wires and sort of yell at me when I'm walking up to get the mail and back. And they were gone for a few years. We let one of our neighbors use our field to keep their animals in while they were doing some work on their pasture. And because they were keeping everything low, the red-winged blackbirds left. So we didn't have them for about 3 years, and now they've really come back. It's been a few years now, but like there are several mating pairs of them. It's just love the sound when they're yelling at me because they don't like the fact that I walk down my driveway.
I was going to say there's so many bird songs I love, but I actually also about summer just really appreciate outdoor music. And there's just something different about music outside, and you only really get to hear it in the warmer months. I'm going to out Suzanne and just say that Suzanne plays a cello, and I love hearing fiddles and cellos and all kinds of wonderful bluegrass outside. And I think that's it for share. So next we were going to dive into a hub spotlight on Feeding the Valley Alliance. So Monica, give us a bit more deeper insight into the work that you all are doing up that way.
Sure. My little spiel is fairly short. We are a very small volunteer-run organization. There's probably about 6 or 7 of us. I have sort of fallen into the position of director of some sort. We don't have specific titles or hierarchies or anything like that, but we are a 501c3, and our mission really is to support, to become that bridge between organizations that are doing any sort of food security and food sovereignty work and our community. And one way we're doing that right now is not just by providing information, but also by distributing Veggie Van Go boxes once a month. It's kind of like that last mile, because Veggie Van Go, the closest location is in Randolph. So we transport the food over and distribute once a month. We're hoping to expand our programming. And one way we do that is one way we've started doing that was by purchasing local eggs right now. And then once fall comes, we'll probably purchase some local produce. And that way we're we're reducing the amount of travel that any food has to do, but we're also connecting local people with local growers. And that's incredibly important to me as we're trying to build more resilience. I really love the idea of Tray It Forward, and I'm really hoping that we can develop something like that for next spring. So we're located in a valley with 3 towns. Hancock is in the middle, and then to the north you have Granville, and to the south we have Rochester, which is the largest of the 3 towns. We distribute our Veggie Van Go boxes in Hancock, but we have a little bit of space at the Rochester town offices. So we don't have our own space at all. We're hoping that that will change if things work out for the repurposing of the high school, which closed a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of work being done to make that, to turn that into a community center of some type. We've also become involved through work that I do with the Vermont Food Security Plan, which is being done through the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund and the Farm to Plate Network. So I'm actually on the leadership team, and that's been really great because it's been quite a process. I've never been involved in a process like that, but we tried to be as inclusive as possible. And it's just been incredibly rewarding work. We won't be handing this into the legislature until December or January. So we're kind of on a tight deadline, and we're getting to the end of things, but it's involved a lot of community outreach and community feedback. A lot of experts have been involved. It's been a really wide-ranging effort. So that's a little bit of advocacy and policy work that we do, trying to stay conscious of the fact that we have limits as to what we can do with our 501c3 status. So so that's it for us for right now.
I think we have time for questions and answers. So if folks have any specific questions for Monica. Leon.
Question, Monica, when you say you connect the local people to local growers, how do you do that?
Well, one of the ways we do that is the folks that come to pick up their Veggie Van Go boxes, which are distributed or given to us by the Vermont Food Bank. We supplement when it's available with local produce that we purchase, and we display that in like baskets and boxes so that people can shop. We try to make it as warm and inviting as possible, so that we're not just handing things out. People are looking at what there is, and we have a moment to engage with them and develop some community. But we always let people know where the food has come from, and they love that.
I love that idea. I really like that.
Yes, Lionel.
Monica, could you talk a little bit about how your organization came to be, to what extent this was a need that was clear to you and to the others that started it, and what exactly that need is? Does this have to do more with providing food to people that can't afford it or are unable to get it? Or does it have more to do with sourcing locally and somehow trying to supplement the food that people already have?
Sure, that's a good question. So we started in 2020 during the pandemic because we have a food shelf, but it's only open 90 minutes, one day a month. And we tried to convince them that people needed more access because you couldn't, it was really hard to leave the valley. It's hard to do anything. So they weren't having any of it. And we decided to look into trying to support our plea with numbers from the area food shelves and food banks to see where our people were heading, because we're in a remote, kind of a remote area of the upper White River Valley. And we found that the majority of people were going to Barry, they were going to Middlebury, Rutland, White River Junction, or Wilder, or wherever the Haven is. That's a long way to travel when you don't have a whole lot of gas for your car. And we decided, well, if we weren't going to get any help from the food shelf, then we were going to do our own thing. So we reached out to various organizations, and particularly to the food bank, and they for a little while we did a big veggie van go delivery there, but that was not sustainable for the food bank. So then we ended up having to schlep the boxes over the mountain once a month. That's what we're doing right now. So we have a volunteer who picks up anywhere between 30 and 40 boxes, and fingers crossed it fits in their SUV, and then we bring them over and distribute those. So we're pretty bare bones. And but the goal was really to provide that level of food security, even if it's just once a month, to folks who maybe they're on the benefits cliff. And we have a lot of people in that situation who they don't necessarily qualify for aid, but they really could use a hand sometime during the month. Unfortunately, our delivery is scheduled at the end of the month, when it's like benefits are going to be coming in soon. And so we were hoping that we could do this in the middle of the month, but it doesn't work out that way for the food bank. And we have to rely on their schedule. So yeah, I hope I've answered your question. It really was about food security. And then we realized that even after the pandemic, people really needed this help anyway. And I have a feeling that because it's done by local people in a warm and friendly way, we don't ask for income numbers. It's really not means tested at all. We just ask for how many people in your household and how many households are you picking up. We assume that if you come to pick up food, you need it. So so that like non-judgmental kind of atmosphere has encouraged more people to come, and we certainly have regulars who come, so we know what their situation is.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Monica, I have two quick questions.
Sure.
One, you mentioned the old high school. Which town is that in? Is that in Rochester?
That's in Rochester. There's it's a huge, like, well, some huge, relatively large for our area. Building that was constructed in the 50s or 60s. So not suited for Vermont winters because it kind of has a flat roof and that sort of thing, which is ridiculous. And with the dwindling enrollment, they closed a couple of years ago. And so it's very expensive to continue to heat that building while it's not being used. So there's a committee that's actively working on funding, trying to find funding and trying to find a program for how to repurpose this building.
Thank you for that. And then the other question I wonder is, when we talked before about kind of things that were happening in our communities, and you had mentioned the closing of the grocery store Max in Rochester,
Yeah.
and that you had been involved in a number of conversations around maybe trying to start a co-op there. Was that kind of you yourself as an individual active, or was it also kind of other Feeding the Valley Alliance folks? Were you as like kind of an organization trying to be involved in that conversation?
things happened really quickly, so I didn't have time to convene our management team to say something officially, but most of the people involved in the conversations were members of Feeding the Valley. And so we felt like it was important that we have play a role in this conversation, because that's kind of exactly what our mission is to support food security. But the good news is that the store was bought. Kind of ambivalent about that because I kind of wanted a co-op to get going, but more important that people have access, and that is the store is now open, and we're just in the few weeks that it was closed, people shifted their habits. So now we're trying to get people to go back to what they were doing before.
Any other questions from others?
Monica, do you feel like that many of the people who can use this service are accessing it, or do you feel like you still have to get the word out or make reach more people in the community?
I still have to reach more people in the community. I work closely with the Bethel Food Shelf to make sure that we know if any folks from Rochester, from our area, are trying to access that service. They will definitely provide help to them, but then they'll also refer them to us so that we know that there's families who could benefit from what we do. So yeah, I think we always need to work on messaging and getting the word out.
Monica, this is Alice. I have a question. So we work with our food shelves, and we've been doing a lot of work on trying to reduce various barriers to people accessing food assets, whether it's food shelves or Veggie Bango or whatever, and trying to reduce the stigma as one of the barriers. Have you noticed any difference? In other words, like, are there people that are more willing to access what you're offering versus the food shelf, or does it tend to be the same subset of people? And we're continually like looking on how we can get as many people as possible to access some food resources. So that
I only know anecdotally that because the food shelf is run out of the church, there are people who feel really reluctant to go and participate in that. It's also not the warmest and friendliest place. So we try to make our event as like low stress and as friendly as possible, and as like we try to make our display attractive. We invite other community partners so that they're not just getting information about food, they're also picking up their boxes, they're also hearing about energy efficiency or whatever else another community partner wants to come in, and then it ends up being like a social gathering. And that is a lot less stigmatizing and a lot more conducive to really developing community.
Thanks. We have also partnered. So one of our food shelves is also in a church. It's one of those things they're the people that have the space. They're friendly though, but we also have another food shelf that's not in a church, and they're mean. It's like,
Yeah.
and you just kind of like, what can you do about that? And then there are food shelves in the area, not in the towns I work in directly, but there are ones around here that do the eligibility. Like, you have to fill out all this paperwork to prove that you deserve the food, which is just such a huge barrier. So
Yeah.
fortunately, the food shelves we work with don't do that. But one of the things we've been doing with the Windsor Food Shelf in particular is arranging for presentations by service providers. Instead of expecting people to go to the service provider, bringing the service providers there. Like, one example is Tom Simmons from Senior Solutions came and did 3 dates at the Windsor Food Shelf last fall to sign people up for heating assistance. But he also has the training that he can sign people up for anything, right? So we've really been looking into that model and trying to figure out more ways to do that. The woman here at the hospital who they call it a clinic. It's not really a clinic, but it's the part of the hospital that helps people connect to Vermont Health Connect, you know, to get their insurance and things like that. She's actually going to start going down to the food shelf maybe once a month, just to interact with people. So, you know, I mean, we're sort of lucky that we're in a hospital, and you know, you're even more rural than we are. But you know, definitely, I think it's great that you're doing that model of trying to make it like a social thing and bringing in those other service providers, because it's that expectation. We always expect people to go somewhere else to get all the services, and the more things we can bring them to them in one place to make it just lowering the barriers, continually lowering the barriers.
Yeah, particularly in our valley, because we're on the very edge of Windsor County and Addison County. So people don't often know where to go. And even when I was in the position where I needed to access SNAP benefits at one point, I know I went to Middlebury because that was the closest office to me. And they told me, no, you actually can't go there. You have to go down to the Windsor County office, which is down in White River Junction, which is like an hour away from me. And I was like, this is crazy. Why am I having to do this? And, you know, those are the past experiences that kind of, you know, have led me to really change the way we provide services in our organization. But yeah, we also partner with Gifford Medical Center, and they actually are the host organization for the Veggie Van Go delivery. So it gets delivered to their loading dock, and then we load it up from there. So that's been really helpful. And Megan, I see that your microphone is off, and I don't know if you're there, but
I'm here.
Okay, great. I need to connect with you on the food security plan. So I will give you I'll send you an email with some
Okay, perfect.
questions. Okay, great. Sorry, Leon.
Oh, just kind of an observation, and that, like, following on Alice, I think and there's so many great examples of approaching it from so many different angles, rather than this is the one way to approach that. Here in New London, the food pantry is literally right next door to the college, and I used to deliver food to them. And then in discussion with them, we came to a conclusion that it's a lot better to actually have a station on the main street with a table and a couple of coolers. So instead of people having to stop and go into the food pantry, they literally stop by the road, see what's in the cooler, help themselves, and drive away. Which is another way in which we reach that particular audience.
Here at Vermont Law School, we've actually had students who really have been struggling with food security, and people assume that law students, they have a ton of money, but they don't. They're living off their student loans, and it's tough with the cost of housing being so high in the Upper Valley. So we set up a food pantry, not Feeding the Valley, but the school has a food pantry for students. And this last class that graduated raised money to donate towards both a clothing pantry for interviews and that sort of thing, and also to buy fresh produce for the pantry.
Monica, if folks had additional questions, is it okay if we reach out? Folks can reach out directly to you. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I will move to Suzanne and talking about, Suzanne was on a panel last night. I actually got to go. I was very happy to make it in person. We in Bradford, they screened the film about the White River Land Collaborative. And if Has everyone, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, it's just 15 minutes, and I hope you do have a chance to watch it, but I'm gonna maybe let Suzanne quickly talk about if you don't mind, Suzanne, quickly talking about the film, and then maybe folks have questions, especially those that have had a chance to watch it.
Not to put people on the spot, but it would just inform how we do this. But does everyone want to raise a hand or put a little emoji up if you did see them, if you were able to watch that? Understandable, no worries. I would also be like, oh, I tried, but I didn't get there. Great. Yeah, well, so the White River Land Collaborative, it's too complicated to try to tell you all about it. But it's a project that sort of rose up via some of the listening programs that VCRD has done around the state of Vermont, community listening, to help communities identify some of their strengths and weaknesses, and what kind of direction they want to go in, what are some of the most important things. So from that, a lot of us were involved in looking at working lands, food and farm viability and food security. And then COVID came, and our daughter, who was also on these committees, took over our livestock, but she's doing a pasture-based farm, and really the land access was becoming more and more of an issue, and they were really thinking they were going to need to move out of the state. And then a little bit later, we found out that a dairy farm that we knew of just in Tunbridge was getting put on the market. And even though that dairy farm has a tremendous amount of infrastructure, the ticket price was crazy. And there's also a lot of forested land as well. It just was obvious that it just wasn't feasible for her to even consider really looking at that. But then, because of all of the conversations that we had in the community and all of the interest in figuring out ways to support local farms, have community meeting space, figure out ways to, bring people together for workshops and learning, and just making closer connections to the environment and how our food is grown, we just realized, well, maybe we should ask and see if this is something more people would be interested to join together and see if this place could maybe fit some of those needs. So that's really how the White River Land Collaborative came together. And we were so fortunate that, being close to the Vermont Law School that has the CAFS, what does that stand for? Center for Ag and Food Systems. Is that right? And Fran Miller, who is on the board of Agrarian Commons. And so that Commons model, that community land trust model, that was really interesting to us. Sarah Danley, who has been many years, very active with the Farm to Plate group network. And the two farmers, me and my daughter, sort of join together and say, okay, let's figure this out. And so that's sort of just the beginning. It's complicated. We actually meet every week. We meet once a week. And there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of Vermont Land Trust. Vermont Land Trust had enough faith in us that they were willing to step in and secure the land and give us 5 years to figure our stuff out and also buy it. So that's the process we're in now. And so there's the base cost that we have to raise is $700,000. It's a big lift for a bunch of volunteers that don't have that expertise. So this film, came about because, it's just a wonderful story of like just different community connections. We had been using land to graze on, and so Shona sort of inherited that, but that land transferred. And so the new owners inherited Shona and her animals. They agreed to continue that relationship. And it turns out that they moved from LA and have filmmaking experience and expertise and connections. And they just love the idea, and they just really have been so supportive, and they put together this this film that just sort of tells the story of the White River Land Collaborative and tries to convey what our goals are, what we're trying to do, why. And we're hoping to use it as a major tool to be able to tell the story and get in front of people who might be able to fund, or people who can connect us with funders, or just even on the small grassroots level, getting it out there somehow so more people can connect. So yeah, that's sort of what that is. Where else should I go? Where else should we go? There are questions?
I'm sure there are questions. I have several, but I had a chance last night too. So I'm going to let others, if people have questions, chime in. Lionel.
Yeah, I have to say that I was personally offended by the sexism of the film, identifying this as a female project that is better. It's better because it doesn't have the egos of men involved. And I've dealt with this my entire life. I happen to be male, but I get discriminated against for that in different ways. Like when I was a stay-at-home dad for my kid, I wasn't allowed to participate in the mothers group because I was male. And I don't know if you were aware of that, but I just felt I needed to share that with you on a personal basis. It turned me off big time. But beyond that, I wanted to ask how this project is different from just a land transfer. There's obviously issues with equity and with the amount, the increase of value that farmland has experienced, and how difficult it is to transfer farmland to younger people. I could see in the video that this was a creative effort to basically try to continue a farming enterprise but it also suggested or hinted at it being something more than that. But it didn't really get into detail. Is this in some way an opportunity for a community, or is this a creative way of basically keeping a farm going with a new family?
Yes, so we are looking at creating something similar to a community land trust or an agrarian commons. There's some differences, and I'm not the person to answer those questions. Fran is much more engaged in that. The real, I guess maybe the big piece is to take this land out of the speculative real estate market. So that then just changes some of the and this is where we're sort of struggling, where, you know, some of the questions that come up is so that this to keep this land affordable for future generations of land stewards, to keep this land accessible to land stewards. And that can really, there can be different models that happen because of that. For example, we don't know exactly what is going to happen with the forested land and how, you know, how our work there will evolve working with the Abenaki community. But it will be it doesn't necessarily mean that the access to that land and stewardship of that land requires the Abenaki to purchase that land. I don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to be. It's also, you know, in that picture, working with the Vermont Land Trust, thinking about, you know, conservation easements. Oftentimes, you know, some of the ways conservation easements were developed, you know, earlier on have really, some of those ways they've been formed actually become barriers to new models, or potentially barriers to different communities that might have different needs. So working with Indigenous communities and thinking about sacred, you know, places that might have sacred significance, or you might have to do something different than requiring that there's public access. So, you know, it's just, you know, so it's sort of cracking open some of the traditional ways that land is transferred. Also, really trying to think about, you know, if we're sort of taking this, we're decommodifying land. And so often farmers, you know, they do their agricultural enterprise, and their retirement often is tied with the value of the land. You know, if they have another generation that will be taking it on that's connected to them, you know, that sometimes helps in terms of, you know, support, financial support, you know, mutual aid from your kids. But if you're done farming and there's no one to take it on in you that's related, you often depend on, you know, on that money from that land purchase And so you're going to get as much as you can. And it doesn't necessarily, and we've just seen that over time, that makes it very difficult for the next generation to come in. And, you know, certainly those conservation easements that have been brought in, they can help one generation, but that's it. It doesn't do anything for the next transfer in terms of affordability. So yeah, it is, I think it is very different. And those are some of the ways. So I guess the other thing is, so because, you know, the land stewards can't, the land is no longer, you're not building equity in the future increase of land prices. You're not counting on that. We have to think about other ways, what happens to land stewards, you know, when they have to retire or when they can't farm anymore, et cetera. So that's another big, like, okay, how are we going to redo a economic system and still be in the system? Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Alice, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, I thought the model was fascinating. I watched the video while I ate my lunch today so that I could actually fit it in. So I really liked it. And it was fun to see people I knew in there, you know, popping through. But you know, one thing that occurred to me when you were just talking, Suzanne, about if, you know, they don't have family members to pass it down or the family members can't take it on, is the model that's being used by Crossroad Farm in Thetford, where Phil Mason, who went to Thetford Academy and graduated, geez, I don't know, probably 15 or so years ago now, I'm not sure exactly. But he came on as a partner and has been gradually taking over their business. So it's not something that requires a young farmer to just buy something they can't afford. He's joined in as a partner and is you know, gradually, you know, taking things along. And so I sort of compare that to what happened to a different farm that has property in or had property in Thetford and, well, actually a couple different places, which is Killdeer. And in the case of Killdeer, Jake and Liz Guest kept some of their property so that Jake could still grow spinach because that's what he likes to do. And you know, but then they sold part of their land to a new, you know, some folks to do Honeyfield. But I think, like, you know, I think like one of those people is a social worker, like they have other jobs, you know, it's one of those things of like, it's just sort of looking at the different models of how farming land stays in farming and like what can actually work. And I think it's like we were talking earlier about a different topic, is the multiple model way.
Right.
Like I really, you know, it just, we need to test as many ways forward as possible in order to keep the land in agricultural production. So anyway, I think what y'all are doing sounds really cool, and I hope it works out. It's tough.
Yeah.
Quick observation. My apologies, Suzanne. I did not see the video. I'd love to do that. I'll do that soon. In fact, probably right after this. But you know, if I look at the big picture, there are these two things that are impacting our communities. And the one is land access for farming, for food. And it is going to get more scarce and it is going to get more expensive because climate change is driving more people into this region. And the more that's going to happen, the more farmland we're going to lose. And the second associated thing is that, and you mentioned that, Suzanne, our farmers are getting older. And there's not another generation to step into that. And so the more models we can look at, the better. I just off the top of my head think of a model where in a case like this, where the stewards also have an obligation to pass on to another generation through education, training, apprenticeship, incubation, whatever the case may be. Another model that springs to mind, I haven't seen it anywhere else, Soulfire Farm, Leah Pennyman's operation, on their board, land has a vote. So you have all the board members voting, land has a vote. So land can actually say, I vote against this particular initiative or that initiative.
And how is that land manifesting its voice?
In that particular case, they have an association with, I think, the Mohawk folks, and they represent land.
Oh, nice. Mhm.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. And if there are folks, I just wanted to find out if there are folks that did want to think about, places where the film could be screened. Is that something that, who should they reach out to for that? Would that be Shelby Palm, the White River Land Collaborative, or you?
Yeah, probably Shelby.
Okay, I can put that in the notes, and
Mhm.
if people watch it and they think that there's a venue or a time and place where that makes sense to share that video, that would be great.
Yeah, right.
So we have 5 minutes left, so we're gonna there was very important discussion, and we don't often have a chance to really deep dive into each other's work, and so we wanted to let that happen, because we can also, Cam and I can communicate a fair bit over email with some of these other things. One of them, in fact, I'm trying to develop a Google sheet to get us to start thinking about those areas that are not covered by the UVRN existing hubs, and start to crowdsource some information of what other food action projects that we know of that are happening in these areas, these communities that are on the map. And I started developing that. I had a couple of challenges, and then Cam and I had a not related to UVRN curveball this morning. So I didn't get to finish it. So I was going to present it, but I think what I'll do is kind of polish it up a bit more, share it out with you all. And the idea is that if you know of things that are happening, very specific things in a community that are not yet connected to UVRN, I just think it would be good for us to start to understand the broader universe of what's happening across the Upper Valley, not just within this group of hubs. But I think that document will be pretty self-explanatory, and I'll start to populate some things that I know about, but I think you all know a lot as well. So we'll do some crowdsourcing. So back to the technical assistance. So we're kind of working through how that process will look, and we internally have had a couple of discussions at Vital Communities, also in terms of our administration and finance team and constraints there. It's a small team, and they have a lot of heavy lifting to do. And so what we're planning to do is actually, with any TA provider, just do a lump contract of 10 hours off the bat. And what we'll do is a transparency document to work backwards. So if you're giving an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, we'll track that. So that'll be on Cam and I together with the TA providers to track that. And then beyond any 10 hours for any particular hub, it'll come to the organizing committee just to understand if there's a request of, like, someone needs 15 hours of TA to go through a strategic planning process with a technical assistance provider. That would be something that we all take a look at it and say, this makes sense. We'll have 10 hours that's just not, any of the one-offs. We don't have to go through a full organizing committee conversation around it. But I want us to think even also a bit more expansively about technical assistance. So we have identified technical assistance providers that are part of this organizing committee, but there are other technical assistance providers that are not necessarily going to be invited onto the organizing committee. So if you're a hub and you say, Berkeley, you say, I need technical assistance on this mapping thing, and we can identify a TA provider, that may be something that we can do. And as well, there might be hub members who can be technical assistance provide, so Monica, if it's you and Leon, that's great. Or if you and Jeffrey wanted to spend a couple of hours talking through, developing a potential project for next year of similar to Tray It Forward, and you would really like some time with them, then Jeffrey's time could be paid for as technical assistance. So I feel like we can think pretty expansively around this technical assistance. And I think broadly speaking, we're finding connections already, and the more we do one-on-ones, we're going to continue to find more. But I encourage all of you that if you identify a specific need and you're like, I wonder if I can get some technical assistance from my hub on this particular thing, you know, definitely reach out. That was a mouthful for now. And then just in terms of the July, a lot of people are away, as it turns out, and we are thinking to just have, including ourselves, the Vital Communities office is closed next week. And so we're thinking just to have one meeting in later July, and what I'm probably going to do is send up a poll to figure out which of the Tuesday morning versus Thursday afternoon more folks can make it to, and we'll just go with that date after the poll happens. And in the meantime, if there are other quick questions in our last minute, and I'm sorry that was all fast forward.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking, you both tried to reach out to me to have a chat about technical assistance. I'm available. I don't know if you are able to stay on after this, or if you'd like to schedule something, we can do that another time.
Let's stay on for definitely a minute at least, and we'll check our mutual calendars. I
Okay.
actually don't remember if I have something at 4:30 or not. But
Okay,
let's stay on.
great.
Great. Well, I hope you all have a lovely 4th of July, and those of you that are traveling, even those of you traveling farther afield for longer stretches, I hope you have a good vacation.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I took lots of notes, so I'm going to work on cleaning those up and getting them out tomorrow. So
Definitely.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.